There you go.
Alright. So I'm gonna tell you guys my story. In my story, there's a lot of addiction and a lot of trauma. So, growing up, I had a good childhood. My mom and dad spoiled me by getting me whatever I wanted, from four-wheelers to shopping trips every weekend. My dad owned a machine shop in Cookville, and my mom was supervisor of admissions at Tennessee Tech. They used to go to antique auctions every weekend, and one day they bought a dresser that was full of various medicines. And at that time, I was towards the end of my eighth grade year in middle school. I got the bright idea that I would take a bunch of the pills to school with me, along with a snuff box full of an unknown white powder, and show everyone because I thought that would make me seem cooler. I got told on, and a bunch of police showed up with drug dogs and my mother. They did a field test on the white powder, and it wasn't a narcotic, and none of the pills were either. But I still got expelled for the remainder of the school year and got sent to an alternative school to finish out the year. At the alternative school, I did the same thing again and brought a few of the same pills to school and gave one to a friend who took it and had an allergic reaction to it and got sent to the hospital. I was suspended for 3 days for the incident. I finally get to high school, and sometime around my sophomore year, my mother gets diagnosed with breast cancer. You always hear of other people getting diagnosed with it, but never think it would be a parent. I remember my mom and dad having to go back and forth to Baptist Hospital to get chemo every week. I saw her brushing her hair and wads of her hair coming out, and her eyes told me that she was scared. I went with her to pick out a wig because I didn't want her to do this alone and because I loved her. I can't tell you how many rounds of chemo and radiation she went through between Nashville and Cookville, because at first she did have breast cancer and got her lymph nodes removed and then had a mastectomy on her left breast. After beating that, she was told it came back in her bones and then finally her liver. The day my mom passed away was a day me nor my family would ever forget. My boyfriend at the time dropped me off at home one night, and my dad's truck was gone and every light in the house was on. Something didn't feel right to me, so I ran inside but didn't find anyone. I grabbed my mom's keys to her Jimmy because it had snowed and the roads were slick and I couldn't drive my car. I jumped in her vehicle and didn't even wait for the windshield to defrost and proceeded to drive to the hospital from Allgood with my head hanging out the driver's side window. In the ER, I found my dad crying and scared like I've never seen him before. I found my mom in a room in so much pain she couldn't be still. My dad's tears turned to anger as I watched him demand the nurses to give her something for pain, but they refused until they ran the proper tests. We were all helpless as we sat there watching her and couldn't do anything for her. They finally took her back for emergency surgery, and I gave her a kiss on the cheek and told her I loved her. I had no idea that was the last time I'd get to talk to her. After hours and hours of waiting, the doctor came out and told us they had to remove half her intestines because they were so damaged and that she wasn't going to make it through the night. They had her sedated in ICU, and when I saw her, her stomach was 5 times its normal size, and she was on a ventilator. I remember my dad sitting in a chair in her room, just lost and helpless, and kept saying, "This can't be happening." My brother was on one side of her, and I was on the other side, and he told her it was okay to let go. It stopped me in my tracks because I didn't want her to let go. I needed her, and I loved her. I ended up going home to sleep for a few hours while Dad stayed with her and got awoken by a phone call from a cousin telling me to come to the hospital but not to be in a hurry. That moment, I knew she was gone. I had no idea how much of an effect her death would play on my life. Before her death, I was like any other teenager, drinking with my friends on the weekends, and because I hung out with the rednecks at the stockyard, we'd be down in a holler somewhere raising cane. I occasionally would smoke weed, but after her death, I tried filling that void with anything that would make me happy again. I started dabbling in pills to escape, and I was never at home with my dad comforting him through his loss because he only made me more sad. 10 months after her death, I became pregnant with my first child, Colin. His dad was the love of my life. I was so terrified to tell my dad and even mentioned having an abortion, but he immediately shot that thought down, which I am grateful for now. I came to terms with the fact that I was 20 years old and going to have a baby. I quit everything, even smoking. I was so excited. 2 days before my 21st birthday, Colin came into the world. I didn't know how to be a mom and had no one to show me because my great-grandma was 90-something years old and my grandma wasn't in the best of health either. Colin's dad didn't help me much either because he was always working and having to sleep, and we were just kids. My best friend came over one day with her 2-month-old and had meth and asked if I wanted some because I was hysterically crying and stressed out from lack of sleep, and Colin had colic. So I did some, and everything seemed easier to do. I started doing cocaine every weekend, having to sneak behind my boyfriend's back because he didn't do drugs. I drank, did meth, coke, hydros, Percocets, morphine, just whatever I could get my hands on that would make life easier to deal with. I ended up getting $72,000 from some land that I had sold. I had inherited off of my grandma because she was no longer in her right mind to handle it. And I bought us a house for $62,000 cash and paid for it. Afterwards, I got mixed up going to the pill mills in Florida with my other best friend, getting 200 plus Roxys and 100 plus Xanax bars, which my dad was also on at the time. I became addicted to Roxys and started to find out what withdrawals felt like. I dropped to 140 pounds and a size 9 or 10. 6 years after I had Colin, I became pregnant with Shelby, and she was born addicted to Percocets. I had went to my baby doctor and told him I had been shooting up morphine, Dilaudid, and everything else I could get my hands on. Because I was honest with him and wanted help, he did try and probably saved me from doing jail time because all she had in her system was the Percocets he had prescribed me. When I got to bring her home, I never changed. I continued to sneak behind their dad's back, shooting Dilaudids and morphine, and eventually moved to Suboxone strips. I went to my family doctor and convinced him to prescribe me some nerve medicine because, according to me, I was stressed over my mother's death. It was really just an excuse so I could get more messed up. He ended up prescribing me 90 Klonopins, which never lasted me no more than 3 days, and eventually he prescribed me peach Xanaxes. Suboxone strips and Xanaxes caused me to get my first serious charge at that time because I had both my kids in the back seat with me, out of my mind, going to find crack. Which was funny because I never did crack, but in my mind there was a guy who lived by Tech that had it. I went to random apartments asking for some guy's name that I have no idea where I got the name from, and they called the law on me. Realizing the law was probably coming, I took off from there and blew through a stop sign, almost T-boning a Tech police. They pulled me over and I went to jail for reckless endangerment ×2, DUI, and various other driving charges. I knew my kids was being taken care of by their father because for once he had no choice. So it wasn't a big deal for me to do jail time. I had already been in and out of jail more times than I can count for simple possession, violation of probations, and thefts. While in jail, I found out I was pregnant again, and my kid's father broke up with me and sold our house because I had him in so much debt to the check cashing places, and at that time had a mortgage I conned him into taking out. Also, I could have money for my addiction. He later found out I still had been doing pills, but he never understood why, because to him, a person who's never been addicted, he thought I could quit whenever I wanted. During all that, my dad sold the family home and moved into a trailer in Dodson Branch, and my brother lost his house because of addiction as well, and moved in with him also. We were all strung out on the needle. When I got out, I moved in with my dad and continued to use. I gave birth to my third child while living there. He was born addicted to everything, and DCS got involved. I tried fighting for him, or so I thought, by faking a few drug tests and even a hair follicle. It ended up being too much to try to control, so I signed him over for adoption. I knew I couldn't stay clean, and neither could my dad. So I did what I thought was the best thing for him since his father didn't want him. Then I met my now recent ex-boyfriend, Michael. 4 months after we got together, I became pregnant with my fourth child, Dixie. I was shooting Subutex and going to the Subutex doctor and getting the max because I was pregnant. Even though I was prescribed Subutex, because of my history, DCS was once again involved. Me and Michael were both bad off on them and couldn't go no more than a few hours without one. After DCS got involved and we gave Dixie to his mom, we began to fight a lot and use more drugs. I was still in and out of jail, and he would cheat on me during my various jail stays. I would come home from jail and most of my stuff would be gone, and he'd have no idea where it went. I never heard a word from anyone while in jail except for my dad. He would occasionally visit me, and during one of those visits, he came in and had a growth on his right eyelid. I knew it was cancer, but he never told me it was. He ended up getting really sick during all this, and when I got out, me and Michael would take turns caring for him and watching him because he was slowly losing his mind. He would wash his face with hamburgers and try to light the electric stove with his money like an old-timey wood stove. I later found out that that little tumor was pushing on his brain, causing these episodes. My dad ended up asking me to shoot him up, which I didn't think it was wrong because he'd break the needle off in his arm, and I'd have to dig it out for him on multiple occasions. This way he would at least be having someone who knew what they were doing to do it for him, and that's how I justified it. It was almost as if he had given up on life at this point, and I guess we all had. He was abusing his medicine from the doctors, and I was taking advantage of that also. It got to the point I could no longer babysit him during his episodes because I was more worried about myself being able to go out and get high with my friends. So I called an ambulance and told them what he had been doing and about his episodes. I conveniently left out the part that I was also using his meds. They admitted him to the hospital because they found out he was ate up with various cancers and started him on treatments. One time I went to go visit him and walked into his room, and his head was the size of a watermelon. Something straight out of a horror movie, and I never knew a person's head could swell so big and not bust open. His tongue was swollen twice his size, and he couldn't talk, and I got scared. The next day I went, he was back to normal and very coherent like nothing ever happened. But the third day he was completely unresponsive, and the doctor said he wouldn't make it through the night. Right then I told myself I was going to tell him everything I wanted to say, and that I didn't do with my mom, my great-grandma, or my grandma. After leaving, I had to go get high because this wasn't something I wanted to feel again. I was losing everyone I loved, and I didn't want to feel this pain. On February 4, 2016 at 5 a.m., I got the call saying he had passed away. My relationship with Michael became more toxic afterwards because I depended on him more, because I had no one else. He started hitting me in the face. He'd try to suffocate me. He'd tell me how ugly I was and how big of a piece of crap I was and text other girls in front of me. He even started calling me Snaggletooth because I had lost a lot of my teeth. He also left me in Cookville by myself on the streets, homeless for 3 days, until I found an old friend to take me in. It was like he had mind control over me, and I'd never leave no matter how bad it got. He took advantage of the fact I had no one but him. In 2017, I gave birth to my 5th child, Harley, while living at Fall Creek Inn. He called my best friend to come take me to the hospital, but he wasn't coming because he had warrants, but so did I. I about died giving birth to her alone because I started hemorrhaging. And then here comes DCS again, and we signed her over to his mother so she could be with her sister. His mother told me that she would never keep me from seeing her, but I later figured out that was a lie, and after I gave birth, I haven't seen her since to this day. Me and Michael ended up moving to Dickson County to start over, and because I was always wanted, I had an arrest record that totaled up to over 55 arrests just in Putnam County. We moved into a motel, which I later found knew drug connects, and more drugs than I ever seen in Cookville. I ended up driving people to their plugs to pick up drugs with no license and started selling heroin and meth. I never did heroin because that was one drug that terrified me. I started to see things in Dickson that would sear a normal person's brain. People there have no regard for human life, and if you overdosed around them, they dump you on the side of a back road or leave you to die by yourself. I saw so many people die in overdose and have a contorted look on their face and be so stiff sometimes. It was never just the heroin that did that to them. It was always some other drug they mixed with it. I ended up in jail in Dickson County multiple times. I stopped selling heroin and meth but continued to use meth. We ended up living out of our car for almost 2 years, occasionally bouncing back and forth from trap house to trap house. We decided to come back to Putnam County without a car by now because we had sold it for drugs, and got a ride from a man and his wife who went to the same church as the lady whose number I got while in jail. We arrived in Silver Point at Michael's friend's automotive shop where we stayed in the office. The abuse from Michael never stopped, and even got to the point he put guns to the back of my head and threatened me. But because I felt like I had nothing to lose nor nothing to live for anymore, I always challenged him to pull the trigger, and thankfully he never did. It never stopped between us, but more drugs seemed to lessen the attacks and make him more happier. Eventually our fights got us kicked out of there, so we moved into the 56 motel. There, everything came to a head. His mom stopped giving him money because he'd never leave me. I never spoke to her outside of a few altercations where she would try to intimidate me and threaten me like I was the junkie who made her son this way. I figured out that me going and stealing stuff for people to get money and drugs helped us survive for months, and I was good at it. I started selling meth again, and there at the motel is where I thought I was going to die for the first time. I already put Michael in jail for aggravated assault for pinning me against the door and headbutting me in the nose and busted my nose. The day I thought I was going to die, we were fighting really bad. I never really backed down from him during his attacks in 8 years, which only fueled him more. But that day, he threw me into the wall and caused me to trip over something, and I fell to the ground, where he grabbed my hair and dragged me to where he could stand over me and kick me in the side multiple times. Then he got on top of me, and with both hands around my throat, he started to choke me. He outweighed me by 100 pounds and was 6'3", and my arms couldn't reach his face to try to make him stop. In my mind, I thought this would be like any other time before, and he'd eventually let up, but he didn't, and I panicked. Eventually, everything started to go black, and I could feel the life leaving my body, and the last thing that went through my mind was my kids' faces before I felt my arms go limp. I don't know why I woke up, because I really shouldn't have, but I did, and I remember him being on the phone with his mom telling her he'd killed me, and I heard her yelling at him through the phone. He turned around and saw that I was awake and had a shocked look in his face like he'd seen a ghost. As soon as he saw me and we locked eyes, I started screaming at the top of my lungs, which probably wasn't as loud as it seemed in my head because my throat was sore and I was hoarse. For the first time in my life, I was afraid to die. I finally understood what he was capable of, but I still didn't leave him. It was a sick and twisted relationship that only God could get me away from. 1 week later, me, him, and a friend all got surrounded by Jackson County Police at K&K Market and went to jail for manufacture and sale and delivery of meth and unlawful drug paraphernalia. That year I spent in jail, it gave me time to think about what really mattered to me and if I wanted to keep doing this. I wanted to be happy again and have my life back and have everything I ever wanted. I applied for Maranatha twice and got denied because I had pending charges in other counties. I kept persistent asking Miss Linda at class what I needed to do, and I wrote Miss D multiple letters, giving her updates on my court dates and how I was trying to get the other counties took care of. Finally, she came to give me an interview. I remember walking into the bonding hall and seeing this woman who was very intimidating, and her hair was all over the place. She accepted me, but told me I'd have to take care of the other counties before coming there, which I was okay with, and I did. I went to Dixon for a week and ended up getting released the day I went to court because I didn't realize how much time I had built on it. At 8 p.m. they released me and I panicked because I had no idea I'd be getting out. And I had to call Miss D and tell her because the acceptance letter said I couldn't leave without a staff member picking me up. I was 2.5 hours away and I called her and we both started freaking out. And she got a hold of Miss Linda, who came to get me with Richard and brought me to Maranatha on May 5th, 2022. I've gained an extended family that I will never take for granted and never let down. Since being here, I've felt more love and had more support than I've known in my 18 years of addiction. Now, if I want something, I put in the work to get it, and defeat is not a word in my vocabulary. I have worked so hard to get back what I've lost, including my license. I've gotten thousands of dollars of fines waived, and even been blessed with a car. God has shown me who I was meant to be all along, and why I had to go through the things I did. I wish I could stand up here and tell you guys that I have my kids packed, but I can't. I have mended the relationship with my first 2 kids, but because of them living in Indiana with their father, I don't get to see them, but I talk to them regularly, which I'm blessed to be able to do. I still haven't given up on my last 2, and I realize that bridge that was burned is going to take more time to mend, and God will make it happen in His timing, and I have peace about it. So I'm here before all of you as a witness to what happens when you surrender your life to God's will. I've been delivered from my addiction, and the last time I touched a drug was October 31st, 2021, over 17 months ago. God is the only reason why I'm here today.